Well, hello everybody. Welcome. This is our fall series of lectures for Universal Theosophy. And today we take up the topic of kindness. And we have three speakers that will be sharing their thoughts with us. It's important that everybody keep their mics muted. We'll try to monitor that to help you a little bit. The format today is it's kind of forum style. We have three presenters, and we'll try to, with whatever time is remaining, to have a discussion at the end. I'll give you some instructions about how to alert me with your questions and comments when we get to that stage of our gathering. But we've had in the previous 2 Saturdays, we've had a series of talks on the concept of thought. And then last weekend, we had 3 speakers on creativity. And of course, what we're trying to do is look at these ideas from a theosophical standpoint. So our first speaker today is Elena, and I will turn over the floor to her. And you can go ahead and start your presentation, and the floor will be yours.
Oh, I'm sharing the wrong screen. Hold on. Yes. Is that good?
That's good.
You hear me well? So, are you hearing me?
Yes, everything's good. You're ready to go.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So the theme on human potential begs the question of what it is truly that we have the highest potential to be. Taking a clue from the third fundamental proposition of the secret doctrine, we might say it is the realization of our fundamental identity with the universal oversoul, which also means that we are all, and in fact, everything in existence is fundamentally identical with that one uncreate, universal, infinite, and everlasting cause. In this third offering of the series, we will look at kindness. The word kindness is related to the word kin, which involves a recognition of another person as being like us. Thus, we might say that kindness is acting with a recognition of some relatedness with each other. And as we all know, a synonym for kindness is altruism. So what is the source of this kinship with each other? It is, of course, that we all came from that same source and therefore share the same essence. In Key to Theosophy, it is written that the root of everything in the universe, visible and invisible, is, was, and ever will be the one absolute essence from which everything starts, and to which everything returns. In the Vedas, it is said that the one reality lies hidden in all beings, is all pervasive, and is the innermost core of all things. The image is my attempt to illustrate that there is that divine spark in every being, and we all share the same divine spark. Brahman is in every atom of the universe, according to the secret doctrine. And the Upanishads state that Atman, the universal spirit in us, is Brahman. And Brahman is all, and all is one. In Christianity, this is expressed as in him we live and move and have our being. So Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10 states, I, O Buddha Kesha, am the self, seated in the heart of all beings. I am the beginning, the middle, and also the end of all beings. Nor is there anything at all, moving or unmoving, that may exist bereft of me. We're all part of one ocean of life. Each of us is like a wave. The waves may look different from each other, but it is the same water in each wave. This oneness then is the basis of kindness. We are all connected. Nothing can affect one nation or one man without affecting all other nations and all other men. HPB wrote that this is as certain and obvious as that a drop of colored liquid in a glass of water will eventually diffuse to change the color of the whole. All around us are clues to this truth. The pandemic showed us clearly that what happens in one part of the world will eventually affect everyone else. We see it too in the economy. A war in one part of the world affects the supply of food and resources everywhere and causes the inflation that we see today across the globe. Climate change is another example. It demonstrates that we even share the life of this planet, and an imbalance in nature and the planet affects all of us. We are affected even by the position of other planets and stars. So everything affects everything else. We see then that universal brotherhood or kinship or the unity of all life, call it what you will, is not a condition to be created. Brotherhood is not a condition to be created. It is a fact in nature. Even animals have some sense of it. We are all interconnected. When the founders of the society stated the first object to be to form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity, they did not mean that we were to create brotherhood. Unity is intrinsic in nature. The goal for our existence is to form the nucleus for its realization. The influence of a strong and devoted group of people who live according to the principle of unity will gradually spread to affect the whole. The oneness of all life is the truth of truths. It is the foundation of all of Theosophy. And if that is the only Theosophy we could learn, that is more than enough. That's my opinion. Kindness. The absence of every ill feeling or selfishness, charity, goodwill to all beings, and perfect justice to others as to oneself are Theosophy's chief features. H.P. Blavatsky wrote, "The keynote of Theosophy and the cure for all ills is altruism." Let me repeat that. The cure for all ills is altruism. This is what the real founders of the Theosophical Society promote as its first object, universal brotherhood. Note that the word founders is capitalized by HPB, suggesting that she is speaking here of the elder brethren, the Mahatmas, who are the real founders of the society. Altruism, as exemplified so beautifully by Mother Teresa, is that selfless concern for the welfare of others, even at a risk or cost to ourselves. It means putting others first, not because we are forced to, but because of a deep feeling for another and a sincere desire to help. And as the Mahatma K.H. wrote, altruism is the only secure foundation for universal morality. If each can be moved with a love for humanity, acts that cause so much suffering can be stamped out. Recognizing the oneness of life is the key. It is the universal cure, the panacea for all of the world's troubles. So HPB wrote, feel mankind as part of yourselves and act accordingly. She said that the sense of separateness is at the root of all evil, and solving the problems on the surface by enacting laws may help, but it will not bring a lasting cure. Teaching kindness, as religions do, also helps, except that even if we know we have to be kind, we tend to fail again and again, don't we? As soon as disappointment, envy, anger, mistrust come in, we forget about kindness. Why? Because we do not understand the basis of kindness. The illusion of separateness is so strong that it is difficult to see that we are all different expressions of the same life. Wars, for example, generate the greatest amount of sorrow and suffering in the world. Humanitarian organizations like the Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders, etc., may help with food, shelter, and medical aid. But no matter how many organizations are there to alleviate the suffering, they can only do so much. No matter how much we give in aid, it will never be enough to alleviate the suffering. For how do you bring back loved ones who have gone, who have died in war, family members who have been lost? The horrors of war are unspeakable. How do you ever erase the trauma of torture and loss? One approach then is to deal with the primary causes of suffering, the ignorance of our true nature, and the sense of separateness that is a reason for selfishness. If we can influence public opinion that the barbarity of war is something we are inflicting on ourselves, then much of the suffering will be avoided, and a tremendous amount of positive good will be done. From HPB's letters to the American Convention, she said, Theosophists are of necessity the friends of all movements in the world for the amelioration of the condition of mankind. She continued, we are the friends of all those who fight against drunkenness, against cruelty to animals, against injustice to women, against corruption in society or in government, although we do not meddle in politics. We are the friends of those who exercise practical charity, who seek to lift a little of the tremendous weight of misery that is crushing down the poor, But she said, in our quality of Theosophists, we cannot engage in any one of these great works in particular. As individuals, we may do so, but as Theosophists, we have a larger, more important, and more difficult work to do. Close quote. That work is to teach and practice universal brotherhood, which is the basis for all kindness and altruism. It is only that which will bring a lasting cure to all of the world's ills. The function of Theosophists then is to open men's hearts and understandings to charity, justice, and generosity. When people have learned to think and feel as truly human beings should feel and think, they will act humanely. And works of charity, justice, and generosity will be done spontaneously by all. Kindness then will come naturally. Our duty is to learn to become a Theosophist in practice, in whatever sphere of usefulness and service we find ourselves in. What humanity needs is a new awareness, a state of mind in which there is no division. We must learn to look at everything from the point of view of unity. Unity must become real in a very deep way. Let us think of this for a moment. We must learn to look at everything from the point of view of unity, and it must become real in a very deep way. This is a challenge for us. Can we look at everything around us and sense that there is the same life and consciousness that dwells in all? Little by little, with practice, it may become possible. If everyone can develop the capacity to sense the same life in every other, then cruelty, even that towards animals, may decrease and eventually disappear. If we can sense the same life in all of nature, we will also learn to be kind to our planet. Kindness brings about happiness, which comes when there is harmony with that one life. Have you noticed that when we do something for someone, we feel more connected with them? When we are in good terms with others, we are happier, are we not? On the other hand, unhappiness and endless misery come when there is conflict with that one life. When we are in conflict with another, are we not miserable? Why? Because it is not our natural state. These statements should encourage us to widen our view to encompass all life. To think about living in harmony not only with people we know, but with all others, with all of nature. There is no happiness for one who is ever thinking of self and forgetting all other selves. If our lives are stagnant, it is because there's no flow of interest to others. no communication with the life around us. Our relations with others are partial and largely without life. But if the attitude is wholly of giving, all problems are bound to cease. Altruism gives one a sense of fulfillment. There's something about doing a good deed for another, whether it is for a person or even for an animal, whether it is to relieve suffering in some way or to make another happy. There is a resonance that comes from within, that it is the right thing to do. When we isolate ourselves, loneliness is inevitable. In doing only what's good for ourselves, happiness will be shallow and fleeting. This is a testament to our connectedness. He who labors for others labors for himself, from the Mahatma KH. What we need then is to advance together in harmonious cooperation to a goal that benefits all. If the ants can do it, why can't we? Our task is to realize that unselfishness and a feeling of universal philanthropy are the inherent laws of our being. Recognition of that true nature results in the highest morality and altruism. This is what universal brotherhood is all about. The first object of our society. Once we understand the true basis of our unity, universal brotherhood will cease to be simply an ideal. It will become a reality. For every flower of love and charity we plant in our neighbor's garden, a loathsome weed will disappear from our own. And so this garden of the gods, humanity, shall blossom as a rose. So the Mahatma again reminds us to work for mankind is grand. Its recompense stretches beyond this brief dream of life into other births. And a final slide. The highest expression possible to mankind of the fact of a shared source of existence or divine life consists first in an unfailing love for all others. Easy to say, difficult to do. Second, the elevation of compassion, humaneness, and simple kindliness to the most prominent position in our lives. This must include the humane treatment of animals and of all nature. Gentleness, kindness, tenderness, caring deeply. These are ways, however humble, by which the very best in a person can shine forth. And so, a very simple closing advice: care deeply for all others. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you very much. So our next speaker, next presenter is Laura Gray. And Laura, if you can, go ahead and share your screen, and we'll transition from Elena's beautiful presentation to yours. Great, there's, you got it. Perfect.
So does everyone see the first slide?
Yes.
Wonderful.
And we can hear you
Lena,
fine too.
thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. We'll look now a little more at the importance of kindness to evolution and to this coming cycles. Kindness is a journey of becoming who we truly are. In contemplating kindness for today, it came to mind that we are kindness itself. Kindness is the core of our being. It is who we are in essence. And we see here the Dalai Lama, of course, who's a global exemplification of kindness. And he says, my religion is very simple. My religion is kindness. Why do we act contrary to our nature? If kindness is the core of our being, why do we act contrary to it? What gets in the way of kindness? In the Mahabharata, we have a character there, Duryodhana. And we can see here in his countenance that he is outward looking, that he is wanting something, that he likes power. And in Mr. Judge's glossary, Duryodhana represents in ourselves the usurper, the dirty fighter, and represents the passions and desire principle. Here we have Bhima, the god of the wind, our own higher nature. Duryodhana, the passions and desires, the usurper, is slain by Bhima. And when we look at Bhima's image, we see here an image of contemplation, of inward looking, of deep thought, of not looking outward. We don't see anything in his countenance that shows a desire for something. He looks like he has all he needs right there. Duryodhana, the usurper, is slain by Bhima. And allegorically, that represents the power of the higher nature of man and woman. There is a power that each one has that cannot be taken from us, nor can we take it from another. It is the power to do what is right. It is the power of kindness. There is a harmony that we have lost as we became involved in form, a forgetting of our true nature. And through sacrifice, kindness, and knowledge gained, we can connect once again and bind ourselves with more strength to the self. When we look at the sea of humanity as a whole, we observe a great struggle. We are one humanity, and all of us are in a process of remembering who we are and lifting up the matter of our temporary natures to express the eternal. Sometimes we succeed, and sometimes not. But that is precisely why we are here. In the eternity of the cycles, all of humanity will eventually evolve to that truer state of being. In our effort to be kind, what do we discover of ourselves? If we ask that question inwardly and take an honest appraisal, we will find an obstacle, a sense of separateness, as Elena's excellent talk showed us. If we take the desire to be kind and from that position examine our natures, we discover and overcome through an effort of being kind. All these tendencies that plague us. Mr. Judge says that the best way to overcome depression or despondency is the desire to help someone else, is to get out and do an act of service, an act of kindness. All the world's scriptures are written to help us with that process. No one should stop reading scripture until they feel compassion. Not only scripture, but any writing that takes us out of ourselves to consider the whole. Emerson, Thoreau, Whitman, the books of devotion such as Light on the Path, the Dhammapada, the Voice of the Silence, and the story of Buddha, the Light of Asia. All such books lift us to the universal point of view. From the Secret Doctrine, humanity is the child of cyclic destiny, and not one of its units can escape its unconscious mission, nor get rid of the burden of its cooperative work with nature. Thus, will mankind, race after race, perform its appointed cyclic pilgrimage. The duty of each man or woman is the living of the highest life, to sacrifice personal will to divine will, to live the virtues, the paramitas, while in temporary bodies. If we purify ourselves and fulfill our karma while not creating any more, we can go to nirvana and lose all consciousness of earth life for the rest of the great cycle. The other path chosen by the teachers of humanity is a path of great sacrifice that will be followed to the end of this manvantara or great cycle and begin the next. This is the path of compassion. This is the voice of the silence. Never will I seek nor receive private individual salvation. Never will I enter into final peace alone. But forever and everywhere will I live and strive for the redemption of every creature throughout the world from the bonds of conditioned existence. The truth that we are is like a bird in a cage that warbles not. And the way to open that door of that cage is kindness, expressed inwardly and outwardly. To cooperate with nature, we need to be kind, to harmonize the powers that we have with the truth of who we are. There is a chain of elder brothers, and each one of us is part of that chain as well and has a responsibility. The great workers are behind us, says Mr. Judge, to my personal knowledge, and not behind me only, but behind all sincere workers who know that I know that their desire is that each one should listen to the voice of his inner self. Then the unseen helpers are able to help all the more. When we truly live to be of service, we are not alone. And while our effort may be small, the masters are behind all such efforts, and from them we gain strength. When we live in kindness, we attract all beneficent forces emanating from nature and the great teachers. We work for nature and them, and they work for us. Anyone who will strive to make themselves a fitting instrument to his full capacity, soul, mind, and body, is necessary to the work. It is a fact of tremendous significance to our personalities. If we are impressed with the significance of it and accept the fight that only fortune's favored soldiers can obtain, we shall hesitate not at all, but seeing that the present basis of action in the world is wrong, will work with it as far as we must, while thinking and acting from a very different basis, says Mr. Crosby. That is what the chain is about, the chain of universal brotherhood. And there is no breaking from that chain, and each one has a part to play. Let's go back one more. Kindness is about more than external action. It is what we become. To become constitutionally incapable of an unkind act, to make harmless our words or thoughts, to step in the shade to make more room for others. This requires a complete makeover. As Buddha said, once we know we are not our personality or lower nature, we are to change it to reflect a kinder motive. The effort of kindness puts us at odds with our tendencies of like and dislike, our countless desires and distractions of the mind. We come to understand what it means to sacrifice. This is an uphill battle the voice of the silence speaks of, when things start to get a little dark and the path becomes obscure. But kindness is the way through that path and through that darkness. And it has its side effects, such as calmness and peace of mind. But it must be exercised with the right motive and with a knowledge that will grow with practice. The nature around us cannot be fooled by a false heart. We see here in the Key to Theosophist, Key to Theosophy by HPB, the inquirer says, is equal justice to all and love to every creature the highest standard of theosophy? No, says the Theosophist. There is a even far higher one. Inquirer, what can it be? The giving to others more than to oneself, self-sacrifice. Such was the standard and abounding measure which marked so preeminently the greatest teachers and masters of humanity. We say, however, that sacrifice has to be performed with discrimination, and such a self-abandonment, if made without justice or blindly, regardless of subsequent results, may often prove not only made in vain, but harmful. One of the fundamental rules of Theosophy is justice to oneself, viewed, though, as a unit of collective humanity, not as personal self-justice. Not more, but not less than to others, unless, indeed, by the sacrifice of the one self, we can save and benefit the many. So we're going to look at this image while we contemplate and think about the coming race. The Coming Race was a novel that was written by Bulwer Lytton. It is also in an article by Robert Crosby in the Theosophy magazine of September 1922. And so to put this article in a shorter version in my own words, paraphrase it somewhat. We can see that no matter what our karmic conditions, we know that we have a hand in creating them. And from that condition that we find ourselves in, we all have the power to create new thought and feeling forms for the coming age. From a state of invisibility, there came visibility. Standing as perceivers in that condition of invisibility, we can imagine an eternal motion, always tending to a vortex, a center, a dot. We saw that in Elena's slide presentation, the very first slide that she gave us. 10 vortices or centers becoming more and more dense through vast ages and condensing into such bodies as planets, suns, solar and cosmic systems, and humanity itself. Within the invisible is the intelligence that brings the results we see. All form is for the experience of the lives that occupy that form. All forms are made up of various degrees of intelligence. Life and consciousness has occupied many forms in the past and will occupy many more in the future. Evolution has no beginning or end. These intelligences include not only ourselves, but all the beings more aware than humanity and all the beings less aware. For in the mineral, vegetable, and animal kingdom, the intelligences are just beginning to get a conception of separateness of being, which increases by degrees through the experience in the form. All the planetary systems and solar systems of the past cycles have brought into existence the system we see today. All life is in a process of ever becoming. There is no staying place in the world of manifestation and change. This ever becoming is governed by laws that can be known and understood by humanity, laws which are inherent in the whole and rise from the interrelation of all beings that compose the evolutionary stream. And this evolutionary stream is divided into 7 distinct great classes of beings. And this septenary division moves through the manifested world in every direction and is expressed in our 7 principles. And these correspond with the 7 rounds of our earth chain and the 7 great races of each round. Each of the great races has 7 sub-races. And this can be understood as embodied consciousness. As our awareness unfolds, so too do the forms that we live in. We are the makers of every condition. No one being is guiding this evolution. It is all beings, and we as thinkers impress all life with our thoughts and feelings. Consideration along these lines brings us to a sense of our responsibilities as to the coming race. Whatever is to be in the future depends on us. It will not change unless we change it. If we are aware of a better line of thought and feeling, we have a greater responsibility to put it into action. We have to become that light for others. We have to forget selfishness, separateness, and realize that each one of us must work for the good of all. And to do this, we must see all beings as one, differing only in degree. The effort of kindness puts us at odds with our own tendencies, and we begin the process of outgrowing those earlier thought forms. In this way, we can become a forerunner of the 6 subrace. To be truly kind requires a heart effort of sacrifice and a living of the virtues. We are not to wear kindness as an outer garment of the personality, but we are to become kindness itself, to reflect kindness from within. So long as racial doubt and hatred exist, there will be wars among nations. Peace lies in the realization of what evolution means, of what is the purpose of life. When that realization becomes general in the world, all the circumstances which hinder us, whether they be earthquakes, cyclones, diseases, or wars, or all the above put together, will disappear. Because if no man will hurt another, then there will be nothing for evil to work upon. As soon as we realize our responsibility for our words, thoughts, and actions to all others, the whole basis of wrongdoing is removed. Does this feel and embody the emotion of the fifth subrace into the sixth subrace? Is then kindness the motor of this journey? Universal brotherhood, sisterhood of humanity is not of one nation or people, but includes all beings. Today on the world stage, we see the great Mahabharatian or Atlantean battle. The battle between the Pandavas, our higher virtues, and the Kurus, our passions and desires. We see its effect on nature and on ourselves and wonder what is the first step out of this disaster. Are we ready to put our lives on the line and try kindness, to recognize the pain we have caused in our enemy, the hurt that is embodied within their anger and their fear? We can see that this is a long journey and passions will rule for the foreseeable future. But we can take the position of kindness within the battle raging in our condition to so become a light for others to follow. Peoples are gathering from all corners of the earth. We see a great effort of humanity fighting this battle of ignorance. Moving along the lines of their own natures, they are drawn together by the very magnet of the beginning of the sixth subrace in its infancy here in the West. The seeds of altruism have been planted. A tone was given of unity, a recognition of transcending our personal passions and desires. But will these seeds grow? Will the tone of selflessness grow? It depends on us. There is no power outside man that will make the race any different, that will make the conditions better. As we think and act, the results will follow. Could it be that the work of the Masters of Wisdom, of HPB, is reflected in all the people around the world who work to help the environment and alleviate to the degree they can the suffering they see around them? All are pioneers of the coming race, continuing the work that will be continued by others. The great teachers of all time are waiting and preparing for their actual appearance among us. But the waiting for a savior is foolish. What we need to ask ourselves is, are we ready? Such a being would do us no good if we are not ready inwardly and outwardly. Their message is their forerunner, and our effort is our forerunner to the sixth subrace. Can we awaken to right thought and action? Can we become kindness itself, the first virtue of Dana, of charity and love immortal? Great is our responsibility. Truth, power, and help is there if we but know how to seize them. So we end our talk today with two readings from one from the 5 messages of H.P. Blavatsky and one from The Echoes of the Orient by William Q. Judge. Your position as the forerunners of the sixth subrace of the fifth root race has its own special perils, as well as its special advantages. Psychism, with all its allurements and all its dangers, is necessarily developing among you, and you must beware lest the psychic outruns the monastic and spiritual development. Psychic capacities held perfectly under control, checked and directed by the monastic principle, the mind principle, are valuable aids in development. But these capacities running riot, controlling instead of controlled, using instead of being used, lead the student into the most dangerous delusions and the certainty of moral destruction. Watch therefore carefully this development, inevitable in your race, an evolutionary period, so that it may finally work for good and for not evil. And so we see the monastic and spiritual development is the development of kindness. It is an understanding of kindness. It is the marriage of the mind and the heart. And from Mr. Judge. We are preparing here in America a new race which will exhibit the perfection of the glories that I said were being slowly brought to the surface from the long forgotten past. This is why the Americas are seen to be in perpetual ferment. It is the seething and the bubbling of the older races in the refining pot, and the slowly coming up of the material for the new race. Here and nowhere else are to be found men and women of every race, living together, being governed together, purifying the heart and mind, and solving the problems of life together, and bringing forth children who combine, each one, two races. This process will go on until in the course of many generations, there will be produced on the American continents an entirely new race, new bodies, new orders of intellect, new powers of the mind, curious and unheard of psychic powers, as well as extraordinary physical ones, with new senses and extensions of present senses now unforeseen. When this new sort of body and mind are generated, then other monads, or our own again, will animate them and paint upon the screen of time the pictures of 100,000 years ago. So thank you.
Thank you,
I'll
Laura.
try and stop sharing. Stop share. There we are.
Thank you very, very much. All right. As we transition to our next speaker, let me share my screen and bring up what Alex needs. So again, Laura, thank you very, very much. And we will now turn over the mic to Alex for his presentation.
All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you, Elena, and thank you, Laura, for the great presentation. And I'll put in the chat a link in case anybody's interested. One of the sources of what I'm going to share today comes from the Kalama Sutta, a speech that the Buddha gave to the skeptics, in which he underlines the fact that this realization has to come from within. So like the goldsmith, to see if something is gold has to rub the gold, burn it, put it into different processes to see if it's real gold. So the same thing with the words of the great teachers. The same process that the goldsmith uses to see if what is in his hands is gold has to be used to see if the words of what we consider the great teachers are really gold for us. So it's an inner process of awakenings and discernment. So in the Kalama Sutta, the Buddha then introduces also what they're called the four immeasurables, which are presented also by Patanjali. It was not something that the Buddha invented. It was something that was already present in the teachings of the teachers of India and also other places in the world. The four immeasurables have no copyright per se. And the reason why they're called immeasurable is because even a little practice of each one of them will have immeasurable consequences of goodness in everywhere, just like waves of blessings, for all sentient beings. So the first one is kindness or loving kindness. That's one of the translations that is given, loving kindness. The Sanskrit is Maitri, which means profound friendship, is a very authentic sense of friendship with one another. So that's the idea of loving kindness, the practice that is brought up by the Buddha. And one thing that he says to the skeptics, he, again, as the great teacher that he didn't flood them with high teachings or metaphysics. He just brought them back to themselves. And then he told them, watch your mind when you are in the midst or in the grip of aversion. See what occurs to your mind when you are subject to aversion. And then observe what occurs to your mind when you are imbued in loving kindness, when you do kind things for others. Observe the difference. Be your own, let's say, a scientist. You're going to be the scientist of your own mind. So you start observing what occurs to you and what occurs to your environment when there is passion, as was presented earlier from the Bhagavad Gita, Duryodhana. Look what occurs. And then look what occurs when loving kindness permeates your mind. When I say mind, I'm referring to chitta. So mind is mind-heart. It's one complex, mind-heart. So that through that observation, we start observing, and by observing what occurs, we start developing skillful ways to deal with our lives. We start seeing that there are skillful ways in which to lead our life and not skillful ways, unskillful. And that doesn't have to be taught. That's something that we can have a direct perception if we develop some kind of introspection and mindfulness. You start catching yourself in different states of mind, and you start seeing which one of them are skillful and which one of them are deleterious. So you abandon the deleterious and you start cultivating the skillful. Very slowly, we're not pretending here that we're all, I'm not Mother Teresa and I'm not, any of these great teachers, but little by little, little practices every day. So this idea of kindness, from the perspective of observation, inner observation. The previous speaker spoke about Bhima, the god of the winds. Okay, so why are the winds so important in the process of observation? because the winds, Bhima, works with mind in indissoluble union, a union that is completely, the two are one. So when the wind blows, the surface of the mind becomes wavy. And when the surface of the mind becomes wavy, then we start identifying with the waving, with the waves, with the different states of mind. So that's why it's so important to have an unwavering mind, as we find in the voice of the silence. So we start dealing with Bhima, with the inner winds. And then you start watching when the wind of our mind is imbued with kindness, what occurs? What are the consequences within ourselves and the consequences around us? And usually, since kindness is part of the four immeasurable, these four immeasurable are used very skillfully for what we call the four intelligences. So they're very skillful ways, and these intelligences are, well, the first intelligence is called attentional intelligence. That intelligence is developed through the practice of dhyana, which is one of the paramitas. You develop that attentional intelligence, unwavering mind. Then you have cognitive intelligence. There is the cognitive intelligence that is developed through prajna, which is this, for us, would be the seventh paramita, traditionally is the sixth. But then you have emotional intelligence, and then is developed through the four immeasurable, or the first three or four, depending if we're seven or six, paramitas: generosity, loving kindness, equanimity, etc. So the four immeasurable. So the practice of kindness, it's key to be able to develop what we call emotional intelligence. Because as we saw before, the wind, Bhima, is the one that conquers passions, which are imbued with a lot of emotions, the winds of emotions. So kindness, it's the antidote for that kind of inner turmoil. So we start developing emotional intelligence. And that is done through this process of loving kindness, this capacity of bringing out a radiance that it doesn't have to be expressed in words, or sometimes not even in actions. It's just the presence, the spontaneous presence of a kind heart. That's why the Dalai Lama says, you know, if you have to remove the hate from the heart, de-weaponize the heart if you want to have world peace. So a kind heart, a heart that is radiant, that mere presence allows for waves of blessings to arise. So we go back to this idea of the wind and the mind and the observation. So observing when kindness is imbuing our body, speech, and mind. When kindness is imbuing body, speech, and mind, we will notice there is a sense of stability, there is a sense of openness, and there is an interest, a sense of inner strength, an inner strength that comes from inner peace, the inner peace that is brought up by the calming of the winds. The winds are calming down. The surface of the lake of the mind is becoming calmer. And as it becomes calmer, it becomes more crystal-like, clearer, so we can see through it. and we can start seeing our real nature more clearly. So we would say that kindness is a skillful way to bring about the radiance of our nature. And in order to sustain that, because here we're talking about sustainability, we're not talking at sporadic acts of kindness. We're talking about life after life after life, because as was brought up earlier with the Kuan Yin pledge, it's not an act that occurs, off and on, or when there's a big crisis, then we all feel very altruistic, but then we just go back into our shell. So here we're talking about how to sustain kindness uninterruptedly. So how do I do that? So the voice of the silence is definitely the source to go to, but the Bhagavad Gita, Patanjali, Dhammapada, all the great teachings of the great teachers are absolutely sources for that. But since most of us know the voice of the silence, then we can go to the voice of the silence and look at the path of the paramitas. If you look at the path of the paramitas, contains within it the three greater trainings that allow for sustainability. And the great three trainings are ethics, with the first 4 paramitas. Then you have meditation, that covers dhyana. And then you have wisdom, that covers prajna. So you have 3 trainings in the paramitas. You have the training on ethics, you have the training on meditation, and then the training of wisdom. So by training with these 3 pillars will sustain the practice of kindness, not only in this life, but in future lives, because what we're doing, we are producing a mental pattern that is based on the idea of unity instead of being based on the idea of separation. And by create that mental pattern and to be able to sustain it and be reinforced by the wind of kindness, which is united with the wisdom wind, that will go from life to life to life. And why will it go from life to life to life? Because we have dhyana. You have the paramita dhyana, you have that meditation, that single-pointed focus of the mind. That single-pointed focus of the mind will carry the sustainability of our motives from life to life to life. And that will culminate through prajna, because prajna is the wisdom that realizes ultimate reality. So prajna cuts through the veils of delusion. And as was said by the previous speakers, delusion is the number one quote-unquote enemy, because it doesn't make us realize our own nature. The biggest veil to realize our own nature is that idea of delusion. And as everybody knows, in this group, we have these two prongs, right? Avidya and moha. Avidya, ignorance. I'm ignorant of my own ultimate nature. And moha, since I'm ignorant, I get everything wrong. There is this projection, this veiling. As the great teacher says, I take the rope for a snake. That's delusion. So these two, moha and avidya, play a big role in the life of each one of us. So the antidote for both is prajna. Prajna cuts the root of avidya. What's the contrary of avidya? Is vidya, is knowledge. And prajna is that discerning capacity of knowing what is real and what is not real. Now, for moha, for delusion, for getting it wrong, the antidotes are the first 4 paramita, starting with generosity and etc. Because that moha works as a veil, works as a mirage. And the practice of the paramitas allows for the mirage to be completely dried out and see the reality behind it. So we could say that the path of the paramitas is a complete path. The practice of the paramita takes you straight to Buddhahood, because it's this union of ethics, meditation, and wisdom. Now, where do we find this in the Theosophical movement? One point of view, this is a personal point of view, so I could be completely wrong, but one point of view is that you find it in the 3 objects of the society. The first object is, of course, the formation of the nucleus of universal brotherhood. That's really the basis for ethics. So that's where all our immeasurable, the 4 immeasurable, the practice of the generosity, it's all occur in that first object. The second object is the comparative study of all religions. So the second object sharpens prajna, sharpens wisdom, because if you really start studying with an open mind all the great works of the great teachers of whole of humanity, the mind becomes sharper. And the other thing that is very interesting, we think that these great works like the Upanishads, the suttas, you know, from the Buddha, all the great teachings of the Tao, of the Kabbalah, and all the great teachings that were present in ancient Africa and in ancient South America, pre-Columbian, they were a manifestation of pristine awareness. They were a manifestation of the radiance of the mind. So when we're studying these teachings, we're not just studying intellectually. We are exposing ourselves to the radiance of the minds that they molded the teachings. So, and that's the second object, that's prajna, that prajna that is being sharpened by immersing ourselves in the radiance of the mind of the great teachers. There is a beautiful saying in Tibet. In Tibet, they say, the longer the bird flies around the golden mountain, the longer the reflection of gold will stay on its wings. So the longer we submerge our mind in the gold of the great teachers, the longer that reflection of gold will stay with us and then will help us tremendously. And the third one, the third object is the study of understanding of all the secrets of nature. And that is meditation, because in the sense, the third object is the study of mind, the profound study of mind. So the 3 trainings, we have them also in the 3 objects. So in a sense, you could say that the great wisdom of the Mahatmas and HPB, William Q. Judge, Alcott, all these great people that really contributed to the manifestation of the Theosophical movement, offer the 3 trainings for each one of us. And kindness, you could say, is part of the crown of the training. It's a manifestation really of the Nirmanakaya, the Sambhogakaya and the Dharmakaya, because the manifestation of the kindness of the Nirmanakaya comes with no barriers, but is imbued with the luminosity of the Sambhogakaya, which is that radiance of jnana, non-dual wisdom. And at the same time, that idea of no barriers come from the Dharmakaya realization. Dharmakaya is like space, radiant and completely without any barrier. So the manifestation of kindness can include the manifestation of the 3 kayas of the Buddha. I'll stop here. So we will have conversation and comments and ideas from everybody. I want to thank everybody again for organizing this beautiful meeting, and I want to thank Laura and Elena for their wonderful presentation. And that's it. I'm ready for question, comments,
Okay.
doubts, anything.
Alex, thank you so much. All three speakers, thank you so much for your efforts and energy to put all of this together. Before we go into any questions, I just wanted to make two very brief observations. One of them is that it was interesting listening to all three of you in that it kind of presented the paradox that this idea of kindness is extraordinarily simple, extraordinarily accessible to every human being on the planet, while at the same time it's incredibly deep and incredibly complex at the same time. So that's one thing that I wanted to share as an observation from what I've learned from all of you. The other one is that it's very clear after listening to all three of you that this whole process of kindness or becoming kind, as simple as it may seem, is very much an art and a science. And there's a great deal of learning and practice associated with it that is incredibly rich and very, very deep. And I thank all three of you for bringing that out. That was just wonderful. So to carry on our discussion for a little bit, what I'd prefer for you to do, because I can't see everybody's faces on the screen, so I don't know who's raising their hands in their rooms. If you can, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see if you drop your cursor down there, it'll open up a menu at the bottom. And one of the things it'll say, if it's kind of full screen, it'll say reactions. And you can click on a button that says raise hand, and that'll move your little quadrant up to the upper corner of my screen so I can see you there. And I will try to take the questions in order. Although I think if we get onto a topic for a little bit, what I'd like to do is allow that topic to open up to all of us to talk about for a little while before we switch to a new question. So I might need to finesse things a little bit there. Joe, did you, all of a sudden I see you popped up there. Did you want to raise the first question?
I'd love to. Thank you. Thank you to all three speakers. I really appreciate your discussion. What I was wondering about is, I think your presentations went far in this regard, but I was thinking about, the way the words need to be purified and they need new connotations. And it seems to me the word kindness is one of those words, which is frequently, it has sort of this insipid quality. It's sort of this weak, nice, gratuitous flavor. Generally, that's the way it's regarded. And it gets associated with people pleasing. There is Hamlet's famous line about you have to be cruel to be kind. And I think a lot of that still persists in people's minds, that if you only raise your children with kindness, or if you're only kind to your spouse, something will spoil, something, there's no firmness there. So anyway, I wonder if you might speak to that. That kindness is much more than merely flattery or people pleasing.
Let's take that in an order of our speakers. Let's give Elena the first chance to respond to that, and then Laura, and then Alex. Go ahead, Elena.
Yeah, I think I kind of alluded to that. Sometimes we grow up being taught kindness, isn't it? we're taught to share our toys when we're growing up, and we're taught to be giving. And there is a shallowness to it if you don't understand why. So that is why in my talk, I wanted to concentrate on the basis for why we need to be kind, which is the fact that we are all one, that there is just that one life that we all share. And whatever we do for someone else, we are doing for ourselves, basically, and we are doing for the whole of the life that we share. So I think that that is very important. We had a lodge meeting wherein we were talking about the 7 principles. And you know how it can be pretty technical sometimes. And so someone asked, why do we need to go through all of this? You know, talking about what is Atma, what is Buddhi, when in fact the Dalai Lama made it so simple. And he just said, my religion is kindness. Well, the thing is, we do know we need to be kind, but we forget. We forget. And so we fail again and again. And so what do we need? We need to change the way we see things. We need to see things from the point of view of unity, and let that idea of unity guide everything that we do. When we can work from that point of view, that all is one, all this kindness and giving and caring will become very natural.
Thank you, Elena.
Laura, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, that is beautiful. In the voice of the silence, it talks about how in the beginning it's green and verdant. And as children, you know, we shine kindness, as Elena mentioned. But it isn't long before we begin to realize that being kind is really hard. It takes us down a very dark, twisty path within ourselves of different things that we have to learn how to manage. And when we have those 7-fold nature, and we can understand the 7-fold nature of our being, it makes it easier for us to navigate this path with kindness when we can understand it better. And we can also see that you can't have kindness or peace without wisdom. You have to have that knowledge and the wisdom. So thank you for your question, Joseph.
Alex, would you like to add to that?
No, really, Laura said it, because there was the famous saying of the Buddha, right? He said, compassion without wisdom is bondage. Wisdom without compassion is bondage. So we're going to be bondage if we're just kind with no wisdom. And we're just going to be in bondage if just wisdom and no kindness. It's always the two wings of the bird, right? When the Dalai Lama talks about bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, for the benefit of all sentient beings, there are 2 wings, the wing of wisdom and the wing of compassion, and then the bird can fly. So what Joseph brought up is absolutely right. You know, many times kindness is people pleasing, and the lack of the wisdom behind it. Wisdom always has to be present. That's why prajna, that's why the paramitas is a whole package. Is ethics, meditation, and wisdom. Missing one of the pillars, then the whole building is not going to stand. So for us, the training is training in the 3. Like a baby, you know, a baby grows, you know, it doesn't grow an arm first and a leg, it grows together. So for us to be able to grow harmoniously, the 3 trainings are absolutely necessary.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Pierre, would you like to raise a question or add to this question?
Raise a question. I want to follow in the wake of Joe's comment here about cruel to be kind. Of course, maybe Shakespeare liked to nail it down a little bit when he gives expression to those kinds of thoughts. But how do we respond to people who do not respond to kindness? Is there such a thing as slapping the Muppet to, you know, wake them up or something? And I don't mean literally, but how do we respond to people who do not respond to kindness because they may endanger others or ourselves? So, and I think that's a very deep subject, you know, and one of the major problems that we see in the world, especially in the political arena. There, you can talk about kindness until you're blue in the face, but if the other one doesn't respond, what are you going to do? And that's a question for everybody.
Yeah, let's not only let our three speakers respond, but also open it up to anybody else who would like to comment on Pierre's question. And to alert me that you'd like to say something about it, do hit that reactions button and get your hand up so I can see you there. Would any one of our three speakers like to respond to Pierre's question?
Well, it is a good question, because right now we find ourselves very much in the middle of that Mahabharatian battle, into that great Atlantis battle. It's taking place around us, and we see those who are succumbing to passion and desire and love of power through autocracy, and those who are trying to establish a democracy that is inclusive of everybody. And so here we are with this word kindness. And what do we do in the middle between the two armies? How do we move in any direction when surrounded by those two forces? So we can, you know, pass it over to Elena and Alex to sort of take that question deeper and give an answer.
Go ahead, Elena.
It's quite complex.
Yes.
On the one hand, what do you do? Do you go out there and fight them? Or do you, and if you want to treat the unkind with kindness, how do you do that as well? You know, most of the time they would say, well, you know, you don't go down to that level. You meet unkindness or selfishness with kindness. But how do we do that, especially on a national scale or the world scale? Even I think about the war. I mean, we're all watching this going on and we feel helpless. But I always feel that there's something we can do even from the comfort of our homes. We can just spread thoughts of peace and kindness. I you know, the first thing I do when I wake up, I'm like thinking of sending all these good vibes to the world. Can't we do that? That has to help. I mean, thoughts are things. Thoughts have energy, they have life. And so we definitely can help in some way along those lines. I also think in terms of what's in the voice of the silence, where it says there is this guardian wall that the Mahatmas have formed, and we can be a stone in this guardian wall, standing either shoulder to shoulder with every other stone, you know, forming this wall of protection around humanity. Granted that we may never see exactly the effect of what we're doing, but there must be some effect. Everything we do has an effect. And if that is all we can do based on our limitations, why not? But then there's also the fact that we can be sharing the knowledge of Theosophy, the sharing of the ideas of oneness and unity with people who are next to us. And then that will hopefully spread and grow. Well, those are my thoughts. Others may have something else to add.
Yeah, let me throw in a thought of my own. This whole idea of kindness, I think, has been brought into the political and social sphere through the auspices of Mahatma Gandhi and people like Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King. It seems to me that the concept of ahimsa is an excellent corollary with kindness, and also maybe partly helps to cover, you might say, the positive and the negative side of the idea. Because I think, a lot of people try to do good and only end up harming. There's a lot of do-gooding going around that's harmful. So the ahimsa idea starts off with the concept of not to harm. And I think that Pierre's question kind of leads into the ahimsa idea really well, because if you're not, well, let me just say this. It was recounted in the Gandhi movie. When Gandhi was taking off on the Salt March, which was just like 12 people from his ashram, about 200 miles away from the ocean. And the idea was just for those 12 people to march to the sea and collect salt. And the British officials thought that this was hilariously silly. And they decided just to ignore, their decision was just to ignore them. And of course, what we know from history is that as Gandhi marched through the countryside, he gathered more and more people to join him. By the end of the Salt March, there were almost 1 million people who met at the ocean to gather salt. Now, when the American correspondent was walking with Gandhi, he said, well, what if the British don't respond? What if they just ignore you? And he said, Gandhi said to his name was Walker, he said, a message for your notebook. The challenge of the civil resistor is to provoke response. And we will continue to provoke until we get a response. So in regards to I think the individual that doesn't respond to kindness, I think if we were to ask Gandhi the question, he would say, hit him with more kindness. Kill him with kindness. Maybe you don't convince them, but you'll convince the people around them. You'll convince the people of goodwill nearby. Eventually that individual will become isolated, because it's natural to respond to kindness. It's natural to respond to sacrifice. And the whole idea of political movements, social movements that adopt this policy of ahimsa is to provoke a response in the injustice, whatever it may be. Now, granted, this is very complex, and when we get into issues of wartime and that sort of thing, it gets even more complex. But it seems to me that that's the direction that humanity needs to be gravitating, is to use principles of nonviolence to resolve its problems. Laura, go ahead.
Well, in the quote from the Key to Theosophy, HBB says that, that self-sacrifice or kindness has to be performed with discrimination. And included in that idea of discrimination, we have to ask ourselves, what the heck is humanity for? Why are we here? Where are we going? What is the purpose of being human? And so sometimes it's not about getting or having or wanting or performing duties like washing the dishes for somebody or looking after their children and giving them money. The kindness that we can project into humanity is in an understanding of why we are here in this process of becoming divine. The whole idea of being human is it's a transition state to becoming divine. So sometimes if someone is not wanting to travel on that journey, we have to either A, leave them where they are until they get up and start moving, and then we can help them. And B, we have to exemplify and remind them that we are in that process of moving towards our diviner nature. And that's what HPV did. She didn't suffer fools. She wasn't sappy in her kindness. And sometimes people thought she was downright mean because she was trying to pick them up and set them on the path towards their divinity. So that's one answer.
Hey, Lena, go ahead.
Sometimes a person may be unkind in our eyes, but they may think they're doing right. And so I was thinking about as you all know, the story of Les Miserables, right? Javert, the policeman who thought he was going to deliver justice. And so he kept doing these, he kept trying to chase after Jean Valjean. In the end, he realized that, well, he just saw one act of kindness after another. And in the end, he started to question himself. So that is one thing that, sometimes we may make a quick judgment about someone being unselfish, but maybe they also might have a role to play. So another example I was thinking of was the idea of an orchestra. When you have an orchestra, everyone's playing, there are all these different instruments. They have different sounds. They may be playing different notes, but together, these different notes and sounds can produce a harmony. So we might think that someone who's being unkind should be put out because they're not playing the right tune, but maybe they have a role to play as well. So that is something else to think about. There is a Sufi saying that there was a crow that was making a lot of noise. And so people said, take him out, get rid of him. And that's what we usually want to do when we see someone committing such atrocities. Take him out. So God came and he noticed immediately something was missing. And he said, who took out one member of my orchestra? So sometimes we might not realize that there is a role that everyone plays. Maybe is a messenger of karma. Maybe, whatever. So anyway, keep that in mind.
Yes, that's wonderful. Thank you. In the chat, someone commented, throw the seeds of kindness. Don't worry if they hatch. And it seems pertinent to the question too. Let's give Alex a chance to weigh in and then we'll go to Pablo next.
Yes, so probably everybody knows this already, but the 4 actions of a bodhisattva, because many times we have this idea of a bodhisattva that is a little bit sentimental and romantic, oh, they're always good and they're always blah, blah, love, love, love. Yes, that's absolutely true. So the first one is pacifying, which is exactly what Jerry was brought about Gandhi. That's the first action of the bodhisattva, and they're all color-coded. So the color that goes with that action is white. Then the second action is enriching, and then the color is gold, is yellow. But then there is the third one, which is enforcing. There is a moment in which the bodhisattva takes up an attitude of force, out of compassion, never out of mental affliction. Of course, otherwise it wouldn't be a bodhisattva. But there is the action of enforcing, and the color is red. And then the last one, the fourth one, the last result, the wrathful action of a bodhisattva, color blue, dark blue. So all sustained by compassion. But there are moments in which there is a moment in which there's certain actions that need to be taken. and they're sustained by wisdom and compassion. So there is a place for wrathfulness. I'm not suggesting to go out and kill people, and I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that that union of compassion and wisdom will bring up that capacity of knowing that there is a moment for strong actions. Now, if you look at the elements, we're all composed by the elements, right? And if you ask yourself, which one is the most resilient of the 5 elements? And the answer is space. So now, if your mind has become space, if your identification is with space, then it doesn't really matter what other people say and do to you, because space cannot be burned, cannot be destroyed. So it also depends at the level of identification of ourselves. So people like Gandhi, people like Christ and other great teachers, they identify with space, the element space in their own nature was the most prevalent. Hence, they had at their own fingertips all these resources, the strength of the fire, like Gandhi, the things that he do, but the compassion of the water, because everywhere water goes, it just allows for things to manifest and grow. And then the solidity of earth, the element earth. But most of all is the element space. If you look at the great teacher, you'll see they will always function as space. No barriers, all inclusive, but at the same time, omnipresent. There is that presence of space that never leaves anybody behind. So that's one thing that is very important for the students, for us. If you want to be a person that is really kind, that kindness to be sustainable has to go with the element space, which of course contains all the other elements.
Yeah.
That's it.
You could say that you can't disconnect kindness from truthfulness. And sometimes the truth element of kindness requires clarity. Calling a spade, calling an injustice an injustice. Telling the truth is kind, ultimately. Because we want progress. We don't want just congeniality. We're looking to grow and to improve. So, Emerson was famous for saying, truth to be truth must have some edge to it. So there's a and I think that was brought out in what Alex was saying too, that the sage is aware that firmness is necessary for kindness to prevail. So we have Pablo that would like to raise a question. And Ram Prakash, I saw your hand go up. We'll go with you next. But Pablo, it's your turn.
Thank
Go ahead.
you.
Unmute.
I can unmute.
I can hear you fine. Whatever you're doing, it's working.
All right. One thing I had to agree that the two group or the two side still fighting since the time of the Mahabharata. They never stop. In America, we have that famous show Dallas, which was like an example of Mahabharata. And we are immersed in commercialism and money maker. So everything is a game, and nobody willing to give you anything, but only want to get more and more. So in the other side, the United Nations, it was created to help other nations. How? To educate the poor nations, to give a potable water, to establish hospitals, to be a better environment, to protect nations. But that doesn't happen because also the United Nations is help with the nations. Now they have to provide money to pay for all the expenses of the United Nations. So we are here in a situation of how we can do good in a society of conflicts.
Yeah, yeah.
That's my
Good point.
contribution.
Very good points. Rambakash, would you like to make a comment or question?
Well, it's a very important question that was posed. That is, if your act of kindness is not responded to with similar kindness, what do we do? It's a very important, very practical question. It happens in our daily life, in individual life, in communities. In India, we have, the two communities, Hindus and Muslims, as loggerheads. And here, the answer to the question is that this happens because of lack of awareness of the law of karma, the law of universal justice. And Mr. Judge says in his letters that sympathy and antipathy are two very powerful factors in our life, which ever saves us or ever damns us. So if I am opposed, if harm comes to me from any quarters, from another person, from a community, it is not an accident. Because after having studied theosophy, I know, though from the worldly viewpoint I'm a victim, but I know for certain that the hand that smites me is my own. So my reaction to the one who harms me is charity, forgiveness. And the charity and forgiveness that I exercise from within, with that understanding, will have a transforming effect on the one who commits offense against me. And unfortunately, in India, this is forgotten. It is an ancient country of ancient wisdom, but today Indian people have lost it. And HPP says the tragedy of India is that it has lost theosophy. So that's one point. And second point is, when it comes to harm being done to a group of people or to other individuals, and if I do not, with improper understanding of my duty, I do not warn or do my duty of warning them of the impending danger, I'll be committing a grievous sin. By my wrong act of charity, if I cause harm to many others, I am not practicing true charity at all. So when HPP says in the key to theosophy that if harm comes from other quarters, and what are we to do? He said, do your duty. Do your duty. So my duty as a citizen, yes, there's something. And if I'm duty as a person in administration where I have to act, I have to act. So the question of restraining the evil forces from harming others is a duty. That doesn't mean we are not being kind. By not performing the duty of protecting others from harm that may come to them, I will be committing a very serious mistake of misapplying and misunderstanding and misapplying kindness and charity. So restraining of evil, preventing harm coming to others from any quarters. If it is in my power to prevent that, or at least warn, I'll be doing. As the voice of the silence says, there is and not acting, in a kindly way when the situation demands, then I'll be committing a grievous sin. I think if we remember the how the law of karma acts, how we make our own storms and not blame others, and the kindness also means forgiveness and charitable attitude to others, charitable attitude to people who commit offenses. They do it out of ignorance. So I think this, some of the ideas that come to me, I just wanted to share. Thank you.
Much appreciated, Ramprakash. There is a question that's being in the chat that needs to be translated from the French. I know we've got a handful of French speakers in attendance. If I wanted to make one comment, maybe you could look at the question in the chat and someone could raise their hand and help us out with this question that's been raised in French. But what I wanted to mention, just in response to Ramprakash, and also in response to Joe's original question, we could say that one of the enemies of kindness is pseudo-kindness. There's a kind of a need for a rectification of names. And when Laura made the point that we're on our way from being from the man stage to the divine stage, it made me wonder if maybe we need to redefine what it means to be human, that we need to set the standards higher. Just having a human body doesn't qualify you to be human. So, one thinker made the point that the bar for claiming to be human is benevolence. Being human means being benevolent. To the degree that a human being is not benevolent, they're not living up to the standard. And you think about the stories of people who've come out of the wars. And of course, the one that's had the biggest impact on my life in terms of, well, there's been a number. We've had so many, unfortunately, in the last 70 years. But the Second World War still, to this day, casts a shadow over humanity. And one of the things that we all discover when we read about the Second World War and the people who participated in it is that the people who did participate do not like to talk about it. They don't want to reminisce about it. They don't run around pounding their fist and shaking their flag, because it was dehumanizing. They experienced something that was subhuman, and it scarred their psyche and scarred their very soul. And so it was very typical for World War II veterans not to want to speak about it. So that leads me to this point that maybe is it necessary for us to redefine what it means to be human in a different way? Can anyone help us with the French question? Pierre, can you give us a hand?
I've put the translation there, so you can read it, Jerry. What is the fate?
Can I read it out loud for me, please, if you don't mind?
What is the fate of one who for years mistreated his fellow men and towards the end of his life transforms spiritually and discovers generosity in all its nobility and becomes a great soul, embodying the three kaya?
Okay, so let's
this reminds the article of Blavatsky on karmic vision.
I see. It's a wonderful question. Would anyone like to respond to it?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is for all the years, and I think Buddha addresses this as well, but for all the years that he mistreated his fellow men, you're going to have to experience the karma of that. But you're going to experience it by not kicking at it. You're going to experience it by saying, this action that is coming back to me is my own. So you're going to use the return of your negative karma, your mistreatment of your fellow beings. You're going to use it in a different way. You're going to use it to instruct you, but you're not going to get away from it. You're going to have to experience all the energy that you put forward.
I'm putting in the chat a book that to respond to this question. It's called The Footprints of the Buddha. And there's a story in it called, oh gosh, something about the story of a bandit or a robber. And it's the story of Angulimala, who was this horrible thief and murderer and serial murderer, who ends up being one of the disciples of the Buddha. And his story, there's no time to go into it in any detail now, speaks to your question directly. So look that up. And Alex, we're going to give you the last word, and then we're going to close our meeting.
Oh yeah, well, the one idea, it's something that happened more recently after the diaspora with the Tibetan people. Here, living in the United States, there is a great Dzogchen teacher. It's called Gyatro Rinpoche. His teacher back in Tibet had a vision of what was going to happen, and he told Gyatro that he'll come to the West and and do the work that he's done. But also Gyatro said, well, why don't you come with me? And he said, I cannot come with you because I have karma ripening. I used to be a very evil king that did a lot of harm to his people. And now the karma has come for ripening. So I have to face it. So I'll stay here in Tibet. He was taken by the Chinese, and of course he was tortured. But the people that were with him then reported that being a great teacher by now, even the torture that he received, it was received in a way with peace and that wisdom cut through. And they say that even his body didn't really feel anything, according to this reports. So even in nowadays, there are examples of people that maybe in the past have done horrible things and now are great teachers, but they still have to face the karma. But the way that they face it is so much different than the way that is faced by me, for instance, in ignorance. They face it, with that wisdom and compassion. So, and there are many stories of this. So this is what seems to occur if somebody starts to embody the teachings. That's all.
That's beautiful. Thank you very much. I want to let everyone know as we close our meeting that the next event for Universal Theosophy is International Great Teachers Day on November 19th. I think will be the third year we've done it. It's around the day of the Kumars, as close as we can get it. It's going to be on the 19th. You'll need to come to the Universal Theosophy website and go to this community menu and choose events. And we will also be posting the lectures that have preceded this one. The first one is up. We'll have the next one, the creativity one will go up shortly. And then the one we did today will be posted here as well. But the next thing we will do together is the International Great Teachers Day. And I want to also thank very much all of the speakers we had throughout the whole series. It was really a sterling group of talks, and particularly today, just such an uplifting atmosphere that you've all created, and which includes everyone's attendance and your goodwill and support of thinking about these things and bringing them out in the world. So with that, I'll say goodbye and good day, good night, and thank everybody for their part in this. And we'll see you next time on the next event, I hope.